Good day, and thank you for joining us this week for our 3S video. Today, Evan continues on to part 2, where we will be discussing before and after the implementation of Lean principles here at Quality Craft, in an effort to show you all just how powerful Lean can be for the benefit of our workplace. We have so much potential. Let's dive right in.
Hey guys, so where we left off last week is we were talking about doors and where their whip was, and their whip was sitting at about 28. At the beginning of this Lean journey. It was taking almost 8 days to move from the back of doors to the front of doors. Part of that was just that massive whip. You had to eat through so many jobs just to move it from one process to the next. And that doesn't include even sanding, because at the time, sanding and doors were completely different departments. Sanding had its own high whip and had its own supervisor, had its own process for moving jobs. And so the massive amount of jobs from doors would hit sanding. And then sanding had to sit there and process all of them. And what we were finding was there was just another roadblock, right? It's another buffer. It's another area for whip to pile up. Going into the first picture for this week, this is a snapshot of sanding, okay? This is their sanding whip area where most of their jobs were stored. They had some on the other side as well. We don't have a whole lot of pictures of just the sanding area to kind of showcase it. You've got all the shelves right here where you can see where they're putting jobs, all right here. Where they go through and sand all of them. Now this is before we had HDF, so all of our jobs right here, all of our pane jobs were 5-piece doors. They were poplar, and there was a ton of work to sand, but also the process that we had here was just not. It wasn't lean. You see these racks here. What would happen is we would unload jobs onto these racks, and then when they were ready to get sanded, they get pulled off and sanded. Then they'd get put back on a cart, moved over to the ramp, pulled off the cart, put onto a rack, where they would wait for finish to come pull the job. Then we have today, right here, right? This is on the side of the sander, bunch of empty carts. Not only is sanding been combined with doors, so they have a combined whip now, but the jobs just move through. There's carts when you need them. There's space. You're not sitting having to sort through. You're not pulling things on shelves and off shelves and onto shelves and off to shelves. And back and forth like that, like we did so much back then. You can see just not only do we have a new sander that obviously the machinery helps, but the process and how we've orchestrated the department has been substantial in changing how quickly we can get it through and how much clutter there is around us. You know, not only were there carts along here with the previous one, but there were racks along the walls where we stocked jobs too. We had all those racks, we put all the jobs on the racks, then we had the jobs on the carts. You know, it was excessive all the time. If you look at it now with the whip of sanding and doors as of this morning, they have a whip of 3. 3 down from 28 indoors to whatever it was in sanding, 11, 12. You know, maybe 30 something jobs, 40 something, well, 40 jobs between those two. It just a substantial amount of whip that's just cut away. That's inventory that you don't have to sort through, that you don't have to shuffle, that you don't have to have all these fixes on, because, you know, how many of you, if you leave a cart or a job on a cart for a couple of days and you come back, it's in the condition you left it in? It's just rare, right? It gets bumped, it gets hit, something gets knocked off, you end up having to fix or repair or remake things because they sat and they don't stay in pristine condition if they're just sitting in a corner somewhere. Something happens to them, you know. And so that was the same thing then. We just had carts sitting all the time, and that damage that happened to them was, you know, like I said in the last video, it's just something that happened. It's something you had to deal with. And you can see there's just so much, it's so much cleaner here, there's so much less, which gives us the ability to process things faster. As far as things go on the ramp, this is just a quick snapshot. This was probably 2015. We'd changed some things because these shelves right here used to extend much further down the ramp, actually. And we didn't have a whole lot of trim on the ramp. The trim was kind of cut or at least prepared for finish on a job-by-job basis by special parts. Instead, you had these metal racks. And what sanding would do is they'd bring out their cart, they would take the doors and drawer fronts and face frames, and they'd put it onto these shelves. And these shelves would go all the way down, where they would then sit. Then finish, they would come up the ramp, park right here, put some blocks under it, and pull the job. That's why we call it pulling a job in finish, because we literally had to pull it off the shelves onto the cart and take it down. And part of the astounding looking back and just being astounded at our processes, why didn't we just leave it on a cart the whole time? Well, part of the reason is we didn't have room for carts because our WIP was so high. We're like, hey, we can only have, say, I mean, we still had 60 carts in circulation. There's not room on the floor for 60 carts, so we need more room on the walls. We need to stack things because we don't have any room for jobs. And really, the answer was we needed to finish the jobs that were in progress and lower our WIP. Lowering our WIP gave us all the space necessary to actually do our jobs and do our jobs well. And so you can see we've got a little bit of an overflow spot for jobs or some of the things that need to go here, some specialty items. But generally speaking, you got down here, this is a cart with a job on it. Everything's there. That was a new thing. It's kind of fun to go through these pictures and see, like, this used to be full of shelves. We used to just pull jobs off of this. And all the extra work that takes. I mean, it really is quite astounding. So going backwards a little bit, we're going to go to face frames. So here we just have obviously the compressor room right here, and then this just jumble of, I mean, you've got belts for the sanders, you've got junk here, it's just clutter. Maybe not junk, clutter. We can contrast that one with today. We've got nice, clean, open access right here. We've got these two jobs that are waiting to go in, but they are labeled, done. The department knows about them, right? Everything has a home. Everything is well organized. You need to get there. It's just get there and go. Get there and go. You're good. Here we have the old racks in face frames. One of the things that we used to do in everywhere where we stocked was we didn't have Kanbans. And so most of this, it was stocked, it was just throwing on the next pieces. The stock underneath here would tend to get old, it would warp, it would get beat up from all the stuff getting tossed onto it, and it just would end up with wood that wasn't usable, right? And that amount of wood would slowly grow. And so you can stock, and eventually you just have a whole stock of things that, if we bring that to here, we've obviously moved the build tables over here. It's much cleaner. Even just, it's hard to compare the build tables with the stock because obviously it's just two different things. But I wanted to give a picture of what just this area looks like now compared to where it did right there. We've obviously replaced lighting throughout the shop. You can kind of see that through all the pictures. It's much brighter and cleaner. Some white lights versus some of the yellow lights. But also the dust. There's so much less sawdust everywhere, and that contributes to the difference in light as well. I also want to point out the angle here. We're going to see the picture of the build tables later, but I want to point out that the angle here is much steeper than our previous tables, and so I just want you to keep that in mind as we go over to this picture right here. It's weird because people will kind of go, hey, my back hurts. Look how far back that is. Could you imagine trying to lean over and get those up here? How your back would feel at the end of the day. And the thing is that we're laying that table back because we're saying, hey, we want the pieces to lay here. We need them to lay back so that they don't fall forward, they don't fall off. You start asking those questions. Why? You go, well, why does it need to be that far back? Can't we just tilt it just a little bit so that I don't have to lean forward all the time? It's those little things like, why does it have to be that way? And when we ask the question, well, why does it have to be that way? Most of the answer is, well, it's always been that way. That's the way we've had it. Well, why? Why do we have it that way? So we tilted it up. Not only tilting it up, you didn't have to lean over as much, but it just made it more comfortable to work when you had to work long hours at that. Again, stock, you can see stock right here, just everywhere. You've got all the piles back here. Contrast that with now. You can still see a little bit much there, but overall, just much cleaner. Right here, you can see the scrap down back here, but this is the red tag. It's saying, hey, this is only going to be here for a limited amount of time. This can be taken. People can use this for projects, things like that. This is the red tag. So again, this is another angle of that pre-lean. Here we've got just scraps, just piles and piles of scraps, right? You got some on the floor right here. You've got all these just leaning against the wall back here. It's just everywhere you look. Like I said before in the last video, everywhere you look, it was just scraps. Everywhere. At least they had their priorities straight and they had a speaker there to play music, right? I mean, at least there was that. Contrast that with now. There's nothing leaning up. You've got the Kanbans all across here, so they know what's needed, when it's needed, how much is needed, organized, clean.
Thanks for watching and have a great day.